Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode, we're talking about the Rune Knight Fighter. If you like what we do here, please like, share, and subscribe. Please keep commenting. We love to hear what's going on in your games and some of the great characters you've come up with. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. The Rune Knight subclass comes to us from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. As soon as I saw this, the first character I wanted to make was an Attack on Titan character, really based kind of around Eren, and how really interesting it would be to be able to be a very talented and very skilled fighter and then grow into massive size. It's a very cool concept, and it's very hard for me to get my thinking around it. This subclass is really built around the giants, and if you actually know the D&D lore, giants are awesome. They are incredibly powerful. They do a number of different things, and it's just a very cool concept, and their history is great to listen to. That being said, you get runes based on the different types of giants that they are. We're going to go into a few of them. We're really not going to dive too much into the runes because you really have to do a lot of reading, and I want to keep this video to somewhat a short amount of time. So we're going to work a little bit around what runes are really optimal, kind of at what level they are. So without further ado, let's jump into their next abilities. At 3rd level, you gain bonus proficiencies. You gain the ability to read and write giant, which makes sense because this subclass is kind of built around giants. So the runes you're going to be engraving are really giant text. So you gain the ability to read and write that, which makes a lot of sense if you're following this subclass straight to the letter. And you gain proficiency in smith tools, which is going to be what you're using to engrave your gear. Again, you're a fighter, so metals and like plate is something common that you'll be wearing, so it makes sense to have the availability to use these skills. This is more for flavor than it really is for actual mechanical use, so really incorporate that if you want to, depending on how you want to build your character, or if you're doing any kind of reflavoring, maybe those runes come from something else. But don't be afraid to talk to your DM about it, and really make sure you help to incorporate specializing things to help you really draw yourself into the subclass. At 3rd level, you gain access to Rune Carver. This is what really makes you a Rune Knight. It gives you the ability to inscribe runes onto certain articles of clothing or items that you have. It lists weapons, a suit of armor, a shield, a piece of jewelry, or something else you can wear or hold in your hand. So try to incorporate that, really make this a little bit of a cosmetic feel for your character. It's a great way to really incorporate it, and try when we get into the runes to really incorporate what runes you select into part of your character or part of what your character wants to be good at in order to really make it feel like a growth of your character as opposed to just building a character for what's optimal. That being said, you get to learn 2 runes right when you select this subclass at level 3. When you hit 7th level, you can select 3, 10th level 4, and at 15th level 5. There's a total of 6 runes altogether, so if you're playing a very long campaign that's going to go into the upper tiers of levels, really just focus on the one rune you don't want to pick and why, and it helps to really kind of gauge how you build your character. So that being said, it's important to understand that these runes do have abilities tied to them. So they will require you to do certain things sometimes, or they'll really work on certain circumstances. But if there is a saving throw, it is based on your Constitution modifier. So you're going to be bumping up that Constitution anyway, so it helps reduce the amount of ability scores you really need for this subclass, which is always great. So with that being said, we're actually going to go into the runes. I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible, so if I run through them pretty quickly, please don't chastise me. First up is the Cloud Rune. Now this has to do with cloud giants, which are very deceptive and very sneaky kind of giants. They're very like roguish and thievish, which is kind of funny when you consider giants. But wearing this rune, you get a passive benefit, which is it gives you advantage on dexterity sleight of hand checks as well as charisma deception checks. Now, if you were playing a charlatan character, this would really be beneficial for you in role-playing scenarios because you were already proficient. Now you already have advantage on these abilities, which is a very big bonus to you. Now, every rune has a passive effect and an activatable effect. This one is kind of a reaction that you can use when either you or a creature you can see within 30 feet of you gets hit by an attack roll. You can use your reaction to invoke the rune and choose a different creature within 30 feet of you other than the attacker. The chosen creature becomes the target of the attack and must use the same roll. Magic can transfer the attack's effects regardless of the attack's range. Once you invoke this rune, you can't do it again until you finish a short or long rest. Understand, this magic can transfer the attack's effects regardless of the attack's range. Work that out with your DM, because say you get hit with inflict wounds and you want to throw it 30 feet away to hit somebody else. Definitely make sure it's cool. That's kind of how it's written, but that might throw some people off. That might throw some DMs off if they don't see it coming, and it's something that you don't really want to be in a scenario where like you use this ability and it doesn't work, so you're kind of stuck in this moment of like, oh wow, I kind of built this ability to be very useful and now I've got nothing out of it and I'm stuck with it until I level out. It doesn't feel good, so this is one of those scenarios. Again, talk to your DM. It's a little bit shifty if it works as a melee attack and you throw it across the world. Like, it's kind of tricky. It might reduce immersion, and you want to make sure your DM is cool with it. It's kind of how it's written because it is magic, so I think it'll work, but definitely work it through. Next up is the Fire Rune. This passively doubles your proficiency bonus on any tool you use. So if you're using something like Thieves' Tools or something like that, that's a big boon when you actually have to trigger these actual tools or these circumstances. Very good to have passively. But why you're really going to jump after getting this rune right away is the activatable ability. The text reads as follows. In addition, when you hit a creature with an attack using a weapon, you can invoke the rune to summon fiery shackles. The target takes an extra 2d6 fire damage, and it must succeed on a strength saving throw or be restrained for 1 minute. While restrained by the shackles, the target takes 2d6 fire damage at the start of its turn, and it can repeat the saving throw at the end of its turn. If it succeeds, the shackles disappear. And once you use this rune, you cannot do so until you finish a short or long rest. All the runes get recharged on a short or long rest. That restrained condition is awesome. You have to really kind of pinpoint who you want to use this on. Highly dexterous characters, casters, this is definitely something you want to keep them in place, prevent them from moving around. It is extra damage, and if you crit and you drop this, that's 4d6. It doesn't up the damage when you level. Understand that. But the restrained condition carries its weight throughout the game. If you hit this on your first attack, that means you have advantage on your second attack and your third attack. And if you get high enough, your fourth attack. And you can action surge. Like, there's a really big setup for just having this one round where you get that actual restrained condition put on. You have to kind of jump at the bit and really go after it when it does happen, because you don't know when they're going to make their save. And as much damage as you can get out is incredible, especially with those high priority targets. This screams out to be inscribed on the weapon. This makes it seem like you have some flaming sword from the depths of like a forge deep in the earth where the fire giants molded this out of their own hatred. Like, this is something that really drives that kind of like evil feel to it, and your weapon should really reflect that. It should be bloodstained. It should be polished perfectly in the blood of the enemies. It should be dark metal like black steel. Like, it should really, this is a great thing that can really give your character some definitive like personality with the weapons that they choose. And as a fighter, your weapon says a lot about who you are. So really incorporate that and really take pride in this and make that a focal point of your character, and it helps really build how important the runes are, because your weapon is so important and it's so important to you. Our next rune is the fabulous Frost rune. If you've read any of the guides, any of the builds, they tell you just to skip this one. Understand that I'm in favor of not picking the optimal thing and picking the thing that's going to reflect who my character is. And sometimes that means picking spells that aren't great, or picking skills that don't really work the way everyone expects them to, but really trying to make that work for my character and making my character feel that way. Because Frost Giants are actually really awesome. It's just a shame that this is kind of how it went out. So the Frost rune's passive effect is, while you're wearing or carrying an object inscribed with the rune, you have advantage on animal handling and intimidation checks. A weird combination, yeah. If you're trying to control a horse, or you're taking a carriage across, or something like that, animal handling is in your benefit. Intimidation checks are great. But if that's not really what your character is built around, it really falls flat. It's a great tool to help supplant some of your role-playing elements, so you're not standing there just being, the fighter who just is silent in a vanguard of whatever else is going on. And it gives you the availability to be threatening, which is a cool thing. The activatable ability reads as follows. You can invoke the rune as a bonus action to increase your sturdiness. For 10 minutes, you gain a +2 bonus to all ability checks and saving throws that use strength or constitution. Once you invoke this rune, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. It's so confined in the abilities of needing strength and constitution, and a +2 really doesn't seem like that big, but when you're first getting this, you're at 3rd level, so a +2 is a big deal. Checks, if you're doing any kind of grappling or any kind of shoving or things like that, or maybe you have shield master, this would benefit you for that. Constitution saving throws and constitution checks. If you had to dive underwater and hold your breath for a long period of time, if you had to win a drinking contest, there are reasons out there. They're just not as plentiful to really make this super viable. It really depends on who your character is. If you're kind of really focusing on using your runes specifically for specialized things, you gotta understand that it's not how these runes work. These runes are one and done until you hit a short rest. So at this point, you can't use the same rune twice. You have to use each one individually. So it's a little hard pressed to pick this, especially early on, but later on, if it reflects your character, if you want to be able to intimidate somebody, take it. Worst thing that you can do is never use it. And in which case you can just level up and switch it out. Don't be afraid to try it if it helps your character be your character, but don't be afraid to not do it if you agree that it just doesn't work for you. This rune happens to be a favorite of mine, the Stone Rune. This gives you a very awesome passive ability. It gives you advantage on insight checks, which is great because knowing when somebody's lying is very beneficial, and it's great for really understanding what's going on and pulling information out of NPCs. And again, it's passive, so you always have this on, and it gives you dark vision up to 120 feet. Which is awesome. You have to be a shadow sorcerer or a drow to be able to gain that ability. 120 feet is huge. But you're a fighter, so you want to be up close. But it's a great way to set up ambushes, so that way you can really give your long-range friends the advantage. If you plan it out right, you can see somebody from that far away, if the hallways are that long or the circumstances is that far. And you can set yourself up ahead, so if your ranged attackers make the attack and the enemy rushes forward, they'll see you and they'll start to fight you, and they won't fight your friends who are long range. So it's a great way to use tactics and really become a battlefield leader with this. But the cool thing about this rune is its actual activatable ability. When a creature you see ends its turn within 30 feet of you, you can use your reaction to invoke this rune and force the creature to make a wisdom saving throw. Unless the save succeeds, the creature is charmed by you for a minute. I know everybody hears charmed and like, oh god, great, this again. But while charmed in this way, the creature has a speed of 0 and is incapacitated, descending into a dreamy stupor. The creature repeats the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on a success. Once you invoke this rune, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. This takes out an enemy. It's a saver suck. It's real easy. You get it right away, and you can use it once for short or long rests. So it's awesome. If you get this off, it's a big deal. You can take out a big enemy really quickly and just focus on something else, focus on the smaller things. It's a great tactical tool. Saver suck skills are awesome when they hit, and it feels terrible when they don't. But the great thing about the Rune Knight is that it encourages you to use all of the abilities, because you get them back on a short rest. So you gotta burn through them before you take it, and if you don't, you really wasted your opportunity. So it gives you this resource that you can use somewhat like regularly, and you should feel comfortable doing so, and it's important to do that. The following two runes have a certain requirement to them. This is the Hill rune. This requires you to be 7th level or higher. This rune's magic bestows the resilience and reminiscent of a hill giant. While wearing or carrying an object that bears this rune, you have advantage on saving throws against being poisoned and resistance against poison damage. Pretty common, especially with traps, and depending on what kind of environment you're in. Like if you're in like Curse of Strahd, you kind of expect poison to be around pretty regularly. If you're into deep jungles, you're expecting poisonous animals, you're expecting poisonous traps. Very common. So having this ability is a pretty good passive ability. But for tanks, for people worrying about damage, this is incredible for you. This gives you, when you activate it, as a bonus action, resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for 1 minute. And you can't, again, use this until you finish a short or long rest after you've activated it. It's kind of like Rage in that aspect. You can put it on, it only lasts a minute though, and you don't get the bonus damage from Rage, but it does make you very tanky. You're very hard to hit because you're a fighter, so you can be wearing plate. It is a defensive boon. It's very valuable. Once you hit 7th level, you should definitely pick this up and really consider holding on to it. It's basically good the whole way through, as slashing damage is the most common damage that you will receive. The last rune is the Storm rune. This also has a 7th level requirement, and passively this ability isn't as great as some of the other ones, but while you're wearing or carrying an object inscribed with this rune, you have advantage on intelligence checks, and you can't be surprised as long as you aren't incapacitated. I find being surprised a very rare thing. I don't really worry too much about it, and Arcana checks really isn't your gambit as a fighter. Maybe as an Eldritch Knight, possibly, but if you're in a situation where nobody has it, gaining the advantage can be very helpful, or just helping out anyone who does need that advantage on Arcane, or giving them the help action. At least this is a plausible reason to do so. When you invoke this rune, you can do so as a bonus action, and you enter a prophetic state for a minute, or until you are incapacitated. Until the state ends, when you or another creature you can see within 60 feet of you makes an attack roll or a saving throw or an ability check, you can use your reaction to cause the roll to have advantage or disadvantage. Once you invoke this rune, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. Another creature means any creature. It means your enemies, it means your friends, so use this. Feel free to use this, especially against casters. When you hit higher levels, these things are going to become more common. If someone's getting hit with a big ability and they need to survive, this is a great way to do so. It doesn't say you have to wait. You have to do it before the roll happens, so you can see the roll and then judge then. Also, it works with save or suck spells that your friends are casting on enemies, or circumstances that you really think need to happen. Putting disadvantage on something is awesome. It feels great. It makes spells that much better for casters, and it gives you the ability to really support your other players depending on what they're doing. All in all, a very powerful ability. Not really too impressed with the passive on this one, but it is a stronger ability than some of the other ones. Okay, so the final ability you get at 3rd level, I know it seems like kind of a long time, is Giant's Might. You learn how to imbue yourself with the Might of Giants. As a bonus action, you magically gain the following benefits, which last for 1 minute. If you are smaller than large, you become large, along with anything you are wearing. If you lack the room to become large, your actual size doesn't change. You have advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, and once on each of your turns, one of your attacks with a weapon or an unarmed strike can deal an extra 1d6 damage to a target on a hit. You can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you gain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. It is a long rest, so make sure to be a little sparing early on when your proficiency bonus is low. You don't want to use this twice and expect it to come back. It's very important. It is awesome to just grow in size and hit a little bit harder. It is 1d6 extra damage per turn, but being large is very beneficial for covering your other players. It is good for clogging up hallways. It is good for making choke points. It is also cool to almost turn into a titan and just get huge and just scare stuff around you. I like that idea. I think it's great. The extra damage is cool. It's more like a ranger ability, which is kind of odd the way their abilities work, but it works. It gives you something extra to do, and it makes you such a big noticeable target. If you really needed to draw fire, grow huge and just start wailing on something, lower intelligence enemies should clearly be afraid of you and should target you as opposed to other people. It's a great reason to be taunting and very dangerous, and it really works well with what the fighter is. With the fighter, you are this like painter with combat. You are this wonderful thing to see because you've harnessed your skills, and fighting isn't more than just something you do to survive. It's this beautiful work of art that you invoke when you do these things, and you have the power of a giant coursing through your veins. So feeling dominating and being like this grandiose kind of figure really shines through, and it's a great way to reflect who your character is. At 7th level, you gain access to Runic Shield. You learn to invoke your rune magic to protect your allies. When another creature you can see within 60 feet of you gets hit by an attack roll, you can use your reaction to force the attacker to re-roll the d20 and use the new roll. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain them once you finish a long rest. Understand this is a great way to save some of your allies. Understand it's very funny if you use this ability and then the enemy crits. It's just one of those things that can happen. It's a great opportunity to protect someone. It's cool. It's fun. You should definitely lean into it whenever you get the ability to use it. At 7th level, you have a bigger proficiency bonus, so you can use it more often. Understand saving hit points from the start of the combat is really beneficial. Especially if it's the start of a series of encounters, because you want to save as many resources as you can till the last fight before just burning everything out. Because if you save somebody a couple of times on the way to the enemy, yeah, you don't have as many uses of Runic Shield at that point, but some people's health is probably going to be significantly higher than it could have been, which will save you on resources that you need just to survive the fight. Be tactical. Try and really involve your character with what they're doing and who they are and who they care about, and really reflect that when you're using this ability. I think it's fun. I think it's better that way. I think it's great to have a player character you don't get along with and you have that animosity, and then that's the character you save. And then you use that giant pride that's built up within you and say something to really encourage them to not really piss you off anymore, because their life exists now because of your gift, and really kind of rub it in. It's a great way to have some fun with some of your party members. At 10th level, you gain access to Great Stature. The magic of your runes permanently alters you. When you gain this feature, you roll 3d4 and you grow a number of inches equal to the roll. So you can grow a whole nother foot just for hitting 10th level. Moreover, the extra damage you deal with Giant's Might is increased to 1d8. A little bit of flavor. It's cool to grow a little bit and just pop up a whole foot taller if possible. It is fun. the real big thing is just you gain extra damage, which is awesome because as a fighter, it's really tricky how you gain extra damage, and this gives you a great way to use that. So you are rocking out with a bigger hit die for your Giant's Might ability, which is great. It works out. You grow a little bit, which feels cool. If you were a shorter member of the party than someone else, now you're not, so you can really, you know, have some fun with it. It's a great way to really enforce what it's like to be surrounded by magic, and it's something that nobody really talks about or involves in their characters. But being constantly around magic should alter you. Fey magic turns you into other things. Fey magic turns, like, furbolgs were just giants who just survived around magic for so long they were altered. Fey wanderers are a perfect expression of this as they gain horns or whatever, or like beautiful figures and things like that. Being surrounded by magic should alter you. It should alter you some way, and it should be reflective of what you do. It should show that it's being drawn into you as you use it, and it becomes a part of you. So embracing this is a great thing. Don't think of it as, oh yeah, you know, it's just I got a little bit taller and hit a little bit harder. You can, but if you want these features to mean something, it should be reflective. Like, maybe you don't like giants. Maybe giants really attacked your village and destroyed your whole family, and here you are finding out you turned into one. Attack on Titan. And it's a great way to show that kind of just that remorse for this ability. Or maybe you don't want this ability. Or maybe you have to use it for the good of everybody else and you just know it's dangerous. Or maybe you let yourself lose control when you do it and make that part of your character. Or make that giant moment your evil moment, and you become cruel and vindictive and punishing. It's a great way to incorporate that. Incorporate your runes into things like this. Maybe you're constantly using fire runes, so your skin gets dark and your hair gets red, or something like that. Work with your DM and really toy with this. It's a very cool thing, and I think it's a lot of missed opportunities to really develop your character in a way that nobody really sees. At 15th level, you gain access to Master of Runes. This lets you invoke your runes twice per short or long rest as opposed to once. The important thing to understand is at 15th level, you have access to 5 runes. So you have every rune except for the one you didn't like. You should really be incorporating using these runes regularly, and now you've doubled the amount of times you can use it. This should really affect how your character is. I would expect a character to really lean towards those real giant thought processes and giant like actions and personality, because now you're tied to these runes in such a way that you've mastered it and you can double your actual uses of it. So you can now do these things twice often. You're using them more frequently. You're becoming more giant. You're grown recently because of your use and you're being around this kind of a magic. I think you should reflect that. I think if you had an animosity, or if you were continuously using one rune significantly more often than others, you should incorporate some of those perspectives and personalities into your character. I think that reflects really well. I think that really causes this thing to be very inclusive and make your choices really matter, especially considering you can be a more just giant, or a sneaky underhanded giant, or just a fiery tyrant. Like, you can really just give into that and just leave that one persona that you had before almost back. You know, like, you can create an entire arc that spanned this whole game just by invoking these runes and making them matter to your character, making these choices of which runes to use matter, and making your character reflect on them and have that impact their character. It's a great way to bring the fighter's distinctive combat necessity into a role-playing element to further develop a character, and it just really gels really well. At 18th level, you gain access to the final Rune Knight ability, Runic Juggernaut. You learn how to amplify your rune power transformation. As a result, the extra damage you deal with Giant's Might equals D10 as opposed to a D8. Moreover, when you use that feature, you can now increase your size to huge. While you are that size, your reach increases by 5 feet. I think your reach should have increased by 5 feet when you originally get this ability and you are large, but that's okay. Understand, when you are huge, you're the size of a dragon. You are the size of a giant, a purple worm. Like, there is a plethora of things that you have, and you can now tower over things. It is very wild to see that in a fight, especially considering what circumstances that would mean. You know, like, how do you get around someone that's huge? How do you, especially if you're in a corridor or if you're in a room, you can block off 3/4 of a box. You know what I mean? Like, you're so big, it's so detrimental to everything that you're doing. Understand, when you grow, the things you carry with you also grow. So if you're huge and now you have a huge vial of acid, how many people can you burn to death with it? Like, how many people can you lead into a searing pool of acid that you just poured out? Those kinds of tricks are very, very cool, and I leave it to the optimizers to figure that stuff out. But you can do a lot of cool things with it. You are now Aaron from Attack on Titan. You are now this huge monstrosity. You are the colossal Titan. Like, you're a giant, and you're just so full of all these awesome abilities. Your damage goes up and your range goes up. It's a really big boon. Our final thoughts. The Rune Knight gives you the one thing that is very hard to do, and it gives you this opportunity to reflect your combat in your roleplay. I really see that with how the runes are built and how the subclass really works around growing with this giant theme and really becoming more and more like this giant. Like, growing in size in a medieval setting is wild. Giants do not have that great of a reputation. It is a very scary thing for your allies to see, and it gives you this great thing to really incorporate that and really bring that what you do in combat doesn't exist in a bubble. It exists, and it's reflective around the world, and that's a concept that's missed often. Your cruelty in combat should be reflective in role-playing. If you have a cleric that's lawful good and doesn't kill anything, and you're beating things and tearing them limb from limb, there should be a noticeable animosity between your two mindsets. It should be reflected, and this sets the ground level to do that. It gives you a great way to take something that's just purely a combat build almost all the time into something that can be greater. It gives you something that you can be sneaky. You can be so much more dastardly as a Rune Knight than you can in other fighters. Like, you can be distrustful. You can be shifty. You can be stealing things. Like, you have this ability, and your runes should matter. You have a great plethora to pick them all, but the ones you use most often should really reflect who you are, and they should really bring you joy to invoke those runes. I would be happier realistically with a smaller amount of runes to know, because it really gives you that customizable feel. But you get all these great abilities with them. You get these cool things that are defensive bonuses, some things that help your friends, some things to take out enemies, some things to deal more damage. It's frightening how versatile you are with these abilities, because you can do almost anything. So really, really lean into that. I'm a big fan of just making your character's combats mean more than just you hitting something. Incorporate that, role play that out. This gives you the opportunity to role play that in combat and really, really define your character's best attribute as being that fighter that's just this talented entity on this battlefield. It's almost a majestic thing to watch, and seeing it turn into a giant and just smash things. It's very cool, and it gives you a lot of great opportunities, and it gives you a lot of versatility. It's an awesome subclass. You should really give it a try. That being said, I'm pretty sure this video went on entirely too long, but thank you so much if you made it this far. Really appreciate everything you guys have done. This was actually an idea that was brought up by Joshua a little while ago, and I really haven't gotten into it yet, so thank you for bringing that up, and I'd love to hear from you and all the other people who have been commenting. Thank you so much, and thank you for giving a Spooky Kid a chance.